There is a weed growing in ditches and forest edges across North America. It is armed with sharp thorns, it survives blistering droughts, and it has a root that stains your hands bright yellow. For 3,000 years, that yellow root was the ultimate human medicine for metabolic failure. It was the answer for people who grew thin no matter how much they ate, and for those who grew heavy no matter how little they consumed. Today, we treat those exact same conditions with Ozempic. In 2023 alone, the industry made $21 billion selling synthetic injections to fix a broken metabolism. Millions of Americans are currently on a waiting list for drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, or telling their doctor they simply cannot afford the $1,200 a month subscription to stay alive. But the exact metabolic relief those expensive injections trigger in your body can be activated by the brilliant yellow root of that wild, thorny shrub. And once you plant it, it produces medicine for decades, for free. You do not need a prescription. You do not need a pharmacy. But the most powerful industry on Earth has spent a century making sure you forgot how to identify it. Welcome to Nature's Lost Vault. The archive opens in China, around 200 BC. Physicians of the Han Dynasty were recording clinical observations in a text that would become the foundation of Chinese medicine. They documented a terrifying condition, a patient whose thirst could never be satisfied, whose urine drew insects, who wasted away slowly from within, regardless of how much they ate. Today we call that type 2 diabetes. But over 2 millennia ago, they were already treating it. They used the dried root of a rugged local shrub. It was neon yellow when cut open and intensely bitter on the tongue. They called it Huang Lian, the golden thread. They recorded the dosage, the preparation, and the results with absolute precision. Across the Himalayas, ancient Ayurvedic healers in India observed the exact same phenomenon. They used a plant called tree turmeric. They extracted the root bark, noted the identical bright yellow pigment, and recorded results that perfectly matched the physicians in China. 2 isolated empires, 2 independent archives, reaching into the dirt for the exact same yellow root. The compound hidden inside those roots is called berberine. But to understand why it works, you have to look at how the plant lives. Nature does not manufacture medicine for our convenience. Berberine is a survival mechanism. Plants like wild barberry and Oregon grape grow in harsh, unforgiving environments where weaker plants die. To survive, they saturate their roots with this intense, bitter yellow alkaloid to fight off disease, fungi, and rot in the soil. It is a biological armor. When humans consume that root, we are borrowing the plant's unkillable resilience. When it enters your body, it activates a cellular switch called AMPK. Researchers call AMPK the metabolic master switch. When you activate it, your body acts as if it is fasting or exercising, even if you are sitting perfectly still. It pulls glucose out of your bloodstream and forces your muscle cells to burn it for energy. It commands your liver to stop overproducing sugar. It forces your fat cells to mobilize stored energy. Blood sugar plummets. Cholesterol drops. Weight falls off. AMPK is the exact same target of metformin, the most widely prescribed diabetes drug in human history. Metformin requires a prescription and generates billions in corporate revenue. Berberine is forged in the dirt. They reach the exact same cellular switch, but one of them cannot be owned. When modern clinical trials finally tested the wild root, the results triggered a panic in the pharmaceutical industry. In 2008, researchers enrolled patients with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes. Half received metformin, half received berberine. After 3 months, the The compound that costs pennies a day performed identically to the multi-billion-dollar drug. Fasting blood sugar dropped. HbA1c levels normalized. The clinical results were statistically indistinguishable. A few years later, independent clinical reviews looked at cholesterol. They found berberine reduced LDL cholesterol and triglycerides at rates comparable to low-dose statin therapy, a market valued at $19 billion annually. And then came the modern weight loss craze. Drugs like Ozempic work by mimicking a hormone called GLP-1, which crushes your appetite and slows digestion. Berberine does not mimic the hormone. Instead, clinical trials confirmed that berberine alters your gut microbiome to stimulate your body's own natural secretion of GLP-1. The chemical pathways diverge, but the downstream effects converge. Reduced appetite, lower blood sugar, improved insulin sensitivity. A $1,200 monthly injection versus a rugged wild root. The pharmaceutical industry did not respond with curiosity. They responded with lawyers. Between 2010 and 2022, pharmaceutical companies filed dozens of patent applications attempting to own berberine. They tried to patent proprietary delivery systems, sustained release capsules, and minor molecular tweaks, but the US Patent Office repeatedly rejected them. The molecule was simply too old. 3,000 years of documented human use constitutes prior art. Legally, the knowledge belongs to humanity. So the industry changed tactics. If they could not own the patent, they would regulate the plant. The FDA enforces a strict, quiet rule. If you claim that a natural plant extract treats or mitigates a disease like diabetes, that plant legally becomes an unapproved new drug. Companies selling highly effective berberine extracts suddenly found themselves in a legal gray zone. They faced warning letters, regulatory threats, and heavy scrutiny. This is how modern suppression works. You cannot burn a plant that humanity has relied on for 3 millennia. Instead, you weaponize the definition of a drug. You create massive legal liability for anyone selling the natural version. You push a $1,200 synthetic copy through the medical system, and you let the silence do the rest. The silence is funded. Today, 38 million Americans have diabetes. Another 98 million have pre-diabetes. The economic cost is $412 billion every single year. Yet a highly effective, clinically proven route that matches standard of care drugs is not taught in a single medical school. Because a wild weed cannot fund a medical conference. It cannot pay for a sales representative to bring free lunches to a doctor's office. The medical system ignores it because it breaks the business model. But you do not need their business model. You do not need their supply chains. You just need the soil. If you want to step entirely outside the pharmaceutical grid, you can grow this medicine yourself. Barberry is one of the hardiest shrubs on the North American continent. It tolerates poor soil, brutal drought, and freezing temperatures down to -30 degrees. It was designed for chaos. Oregon grape is a shade-tolerant alternative that thrives under the canopies of dense forests. It spreads slowly into naturalized colonies, asking for absolutely nothing. The medicine is concentrated in the inner bark of the roots. If you plant a barberry shrub, you let it establish itself for a few years. In the late autumn, when the plant pulls its energy down into the earth to survive the winter, you harvest a portion of the roots. You scrape away the rough outer layer to reveal the brilliant neon yellow inner bark. You dry it, you crush it, you steep it into a bitter tea. It is intensely bitter. But that bitterness is the medicine. That is the survival mechanism of the plant, waking up your own metabolic system. 10 years from now, your neighbors will be anxious about the rising cost of prescriptions, insurance premiums, and pharmaceutical shortages. You will walk out to your garden, harvest a root that has outlasted empires, and feel a calm that no amount of money can buy. You will have built sovereignty, not the loud kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that simply does not need permission to exist. For 3,000 years, the golden thread kept humanity alive. The pharmaceutical industry tried to steal it, failed, and used regulation to hide it in plain sight. But the plant is still here, waiting in the dirt. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe so you do not miss the next system we uncover. Share this with someone who is trapped on a pharmaceutical subscription they cannot afford. The knowledge is still here. The choice is yours.